Hey everyone. I wanted to post this story up in hopes of explaining that horror that you can actually find on the dark web. Honestly, most of the things you can find on the dark web aren't actually the horror movie cliché-laden websites that everyone seems to think they are. Most of the dark web is questionable or illegal adult content, people trying to buy medications illegally, etc. If you're wanting something like what you see in the movies, you have to actually know where to look, as in have the onion link. I'm not saying that those things don't exist, they're just not really easily or readily available. A lot of people tend to think it's just like a dark version of Google where you can search for crazy stuff and be given results within a few moments. It's really not. Anyways, that out of the way, I wanted to talk about a dark web experience that was honestly horrifying for my friends and I. This was several years ago. I think we were 17 at the time, and we thought we were hackers. I know, it sounds stupid, but the three of us were all about the nerdy crap Python networking and again, quote-unquote, hacking. I'll spare myself the embarrassment in explaining all of that. Just know that we knew our way around a computer. Naturally, the three of us gravitated towards places like Reddit and then 4chan and such. I don't remember where we heard about the dark web, probably from a friend, the news, or one of the aforementioned websites, but when we learned about the difference between surface web and dark web, our curiosity was piqued. We started looking into what it was, what was out there, and what we could do, and of course, we were enchanted with the hacker haven it was glorified to be. We thought we would get on there, look at some of the questionable sites, and be the coolest kids because we accessed content that others didn't know existed. So we did what we had to. Loaded up Tor, got information from some onion links, and got ready to have our minds blown. Of course, it ended up not being as interesting as we thought it was going to be. The sites were plain and bland. We saw a couple of sites selling pills, others that we didn't even bother scrolling through because of the front pages, and a few webcam sites that we honestly weren't interested in. I think all of us were getting a bit disappointed in what we were finding, though I don't know what we were really expecting to find. I think we started just clicking through and going anywhere and everywhere we could get to. Looking back, this was a really stupid idea. After clicking around for a while, we ended up on a page that looked a little flashier than the others. I can't remember the name of the page, but I think it was something along the lines of "Your Choice," or something like that. As we stared on the home screen, the whole page looked like it was a site for a butcher shop. There were a number of pictures of meat slicers and cuts all over the front page, explaining the quality and what seasoning went best with each piece. Unfortunately, I think you can see where all this is going. We ended up on a page with a list of cuts, and each of them had a diagram of a person. The part where the meat came from was highlighted. Some of what was on the page was horribly graphic, so I won't explain it in this story, but you can imagine what was all on there. One of the most disturbing parts of this website was its explanation of its sourcing. I recall it explaining that all packaging would be discreet, and that they would include their own seasoning packet that would go best with what you chose. What's worse, they explained that all of their meat was fresh and sourced on demand. They touted that the fact that they had the ability to get everything when it was ordered. Obviously, we were freaked out by seeing this kind of meat. We got off the site and pretty much immediately removed Tor. We all kept up our pursuits in the IT world, but I don't think any of us have ever been back to the dark web since. This happened a couple years ago. I don't remember the exact month or year, but it couldn't have been more than just a few years ago, because Bitcoin was at or near its peak. I used to spend a lot of time on the deep web, mostly on forums and things like that, but never on anything that was explicitly illegal. I know that sounds incredibly convincing, right? Believe it or not, there are pages on the deep web that are good for entertainment. Some of them are in the gray area as far as ethics go, but again, not explicitly illegal. And some of them only become illegal if you take action on the page, I think. Look, I'm not a lawyer, so I don't really know. Anyways, I was browsing pages without intent to actually do anything on them. I was just pursuing through random onion links to see what interesting stuff I could find. After checking out some random pages that sold things that definitely were not legal, I found a page that, well, again, definitely was not legal. From the start of the page, I knew this page was serious. The name of the page was something like L.H. Oswald Solutions, an obvious allusion to Lee Harvey Oswald, the man who assassinated JFK. Honestly, seeing that made me chuckle. Something about using Oswald's name for the page was genuinely humorous. After reading their information, it was pretty clear why they used that as the name. The entire page was meant for users to pay Bitcoin and hire a hitman. The page explained that they had top-tier men working for them, and price categories as well. The product started as intimidation, including things like arson, murder, designed to look like a failed robbery, and had other tiers that were meant to make it look like an accident. The last one was the most expensive, obviously, and they gave scenarios and how it could happen, including hiking incidents, accidental drownings, and car troubles. Now, I had no intent on doing anything on this page other than reading what they had to say, mostly for entertainment. But then I got to the bottom of the page. They had a full-on legal disclosure, which I thought was hilarious, that explained what actions could be taken if they failed and laid out their personal guarantee that they could find anyone and everyone without fail. Immediately after this was a small note at the bottom. We can find anyone, and we can prove it. Click here for proof. Now, I know what you're thinking. No sane person would ever click that link, and no one could be so stupid as to click it intentionally. I didn't want to, but I had to. I had to know how they would guarantee that they could find anyone. So I clicked the button and the page switched over to a plain black site with a smiley face and an hourglass icon that indicated it was loading. After a few seconds, the hourglass turned into a check mark. At first, I thought that was it. It was just going to sit there with the check mark and that was it. Then, much to my surprise, my cell phone started ringing. Obviously, I was freaking out inside, but I answered my phone anyway. I said hello. The voice on the other end was digitized, thankfully. It basically said, "Here's your proof. Thank you for considering our services a few times," and then hung up. I was actually grateful that it was a robocall and not a real person, but I was also terrified that it was able to find my number and call me. This was enough to tell me that they weren't screwing around, and that I needed to never go on their website or question whether or not those hitman sites are legit. Ever again. This story goes back a few years. I don't recall the exact year, but it was probably between 2010 and 2011. I would have been 20 because I was living with my parents but attending night college classes. Not really important, but it does help to explain that I wasn't a kid at the time, and I should have known better. Anyways, like a lot of people that have an understanding of surface web versus deep web, I was dumb and curious. There was this one guy in one of my classes that was obviously a basement dweller. Not trying to be rude, he just looked the part. I'm not going to describe him, you know the stereotype. But let's call him Jason. Jason was a bit antisocial, but he and I were decent friends due to our mutual interest in technology. I remember there was one night that class let out early. He and I went out to the lounge on campus and were talking about random tech stuff. He brought up the dark web, and at the time I wasn't really knowledgeable on what exactly it was. His explanation was pretty straightforward. It was a collection of sites and pages that were essentially hidden from the everyday user. And because of this, it was rife with illegal activity. At first, his explanation was enough to make me lose interest, but then he started showing me the pages that he used. He said that the main one was basically a bulletin board like 4chan, but better. He warned me that some of it was questionable, but there were sections where people would talk about philosophy, new technology, politics, and conspiracy theories. Now, I'm a bit of a conspiracy nut. Not that I believe in them, but that I love to read them and see what people think. Obviously, some of them are completely insane, but there are some theories that are interesting and really get you thinking. When Jason told me about this conspiracy board, it caught my attention. I told him that I wanted to get in on it, and he gave me a look that basically said, "I don't think you should be doing this." I told him that I understood the risk and that I would take any precaution that he suggested. I guess this was enough to convince him, and he gave me a list of things to do when I got home in order to get on the site. He then gave me the Onion link to the page, and that was that. I went home, got on my desktop downstairs, and set up everything he had said to set up. From there, I got on the bulletin and spent the entire night reading various conspiracy theories and paranormal explanations. Honestly, this was a highlight of the year. There were some of the craziest theories I had ever read. After a few days, I started feeling a bit more comfortable and started commenting on posts. For the most part, I would prod for more information, and people were shockingly respectful. I was genuinely surprised how straightforward these posts were. The people seemed almost decent, and most of them were fairly dismissive to the less than desirable theories out there. To be completely honest, this page felt more like a surface web page. They were mostly respectful and open to discussion. The only reason I can think that this was a deep website would be that they wanted a place to call their own and not get a ton of traffic. Then it all went south fast. There was one post where the theorists started in on something interesting, but then immediately turned their entire theory into a pile of racist drivel. There weren't any comments on the post yet, so I decided to comment and be a bit of an ass to this guy. Maybe the anonymity had gotten to me, but I posted something like, "Get your racist BS off the board. Your kind isn't welcome here." It was a basic comment, but I was satisfied that the others would back me up and that this guy would get the hint and go away. After a few minutes, I went back to the post to see if there were any responses. No surprise, there was. I opened the thread and there was only one comment from the original poster, and it said the following: "F off, David." I was a bit shocked. My name is in fact David, but I had no idea how he could have known that. I started thinking back to whether or not I had maybe posted my name in another thread, if he had somehow linked me to that post. I had followed all of Jason's recommendations and covered my tracks in every way he recommended. I decided to feign ignorance. I commented with, "My name's not David. Nice try though. I think that was where I made my biggest mistake. I shouldn't have challenged him. I should have just ignored him and moved on." He replied within a few moments, "Oh really? You're not David Collins living with Carol and Larry Collins at 1706 Hampshire Lane in Asheville, Virginia, attending J.B. Rhine University and working part-time at Target?" I was completely in awe. This person had completely gathered all of my personal information within a matter of a few minutes, and it was completely accurate. I was honestly sweating at the prospect of this dark web rando knowing exactly who I was. I decided I would comment one more time and basically concede this conversation. I wrote, "You win. I'll shut up," or something like that. There may have been more panic in my comment than that. I went back after a few moments and noticed that his original comment was gone, and in its place was the following: "Overwritten by Mod, to David. I'll remove your info this time as a courtesy, but it's best you keep your mouth shut from now on. Also, get a better VPN. Your current one is leaking your IP." Apparently, the VPN that Jason told me to use had an information leak, one that he wasn't aware of, and one that gave away my actual location and registered information. I told Jason about what had happened and he laughed at me. He told me it was my fault because I didn't do an IP check while connected to see if my info was hidden. He was right, that was part of his checklist.